Okay, let's talk about the transmission of the Bible. So what do I mean by the transmission of the Bible? I'm referring to the copying, translating, recopying, and retranslating of the Bible. When we discuss the transmission of Scripture, we're trying to address the question, is the Bible as we now have it an accurate reproduction of the original books as produced by the Old Testament prophets and New Testament apostles? Now, before we can get into the transmission of the Bible, I think it helps if we talk about cookie recipes. I want you to imagine with me that your great-great-grandmother has a cookie recipe to end all cookie recipes. I mean, if this cookie recipe got out, it would just put Miss Fields out of business, okay? And you're trying to find it, but the only copy that she had written down burned up in the house. And so now you're out looking for other copies of this cookie recipe. Now you know that she allowed her neighbors to copy the recipe. And so some of her neighbors might have it. And you know that those neighbors also gave it to their relatives and to other people in the community. And then those people gave it down to younger generations and so on. And so what you do is you go and you gather all of these recipes that have been written down and have been copied, and you start to match them. You start with the oldest ones first because they're the ones closest to your great-great-grandmother's cookie recipe. And then you start to see if there are any variations. Like, for example, if one of the recipes says to add cinnamon, but you know that your great-great-grandmother had a vendetta against cinnamon, and so you know she wouldn't add that, you might just ignore that line, thinking that it came from somebody else. And eventually, after compiling all of these recipes and looking for consistencies and looking at the age of them, you might be able to figure out the exact recipe from your great-great-grandmother. Now, what I've just described to you is, in simplistic terms, textual criticism. And this is what biblical scholars try to do when they are trying to take copies of the Old Testament and New Testament that they have and trying to reproduce something close to that. So let's talk about the Old Testament copies, or we'll call them manuscripts. There are tens of thousands of manuscript fragments, ranging from the Nash Papyrus, which is about 1,000 years older than most of the earliest Old Testament Hebrew manuscripts, to the Dead Sea Scrolls, which contains about 600 manuscripts, including one complete copy of the book of Isaiah. In regards to the New Testament manuscripts, we have 5,366 partial and complete manuscript portions. And these were copied by hand through the 2nd and 15th centuries. Now, you might not be impressed with that, but compare that with this. Homer's Iliad. We're pretty sure we know what Homer wrote. We only have 643 copies of that book, most of which are thousands of years removed from the original copy. Or when you think about Julius Caesar's Gallic Wars, we only have 10 copies of that. I think based off of that, it's pretty safe to say that what we have is close to the original copies. So next time you're reading the Bible, you can rest assured that you are reading very nearly the same words written by the prophets and apostles, just in your own vernacular.